As I was just telling Nick, there's all kinds of things happening in the world, and Nick was giving me some updates on some issues that we needed to pay attention to, and all along those lines. So definitely we'll get to these conversations and find out a number of things that are happening, including some things that folks may be concerned about in their neck of the woods as well. But one of the things that I was seeing was that there was another shooting that took place as well this weekend, that being a Memorial Day mass shooting that took place in Hollywood, Florida. And 9 people were injured, including 4 minors. And that took place in an area that I know that Nick knows well, which is that whole Florida area. We're going to see if other folks have got thoughts about that particular incident and other things that might be going on in the gun debate. And of course, we do know that the debt ceiling is a topic of conversation, and folks are trying to figure out what the House is going to do now that is going on, since it is facing its first major test in a House Rules Committee. That is right, it's going to go there, and we're going to see what happens. Apparently, the Republicans are trying to scuttle the debt limit bill in the House Rules Committee as pressure grows on key swing votes. You got to love those swing votes and all in that kind of space. And Trump's lawyer is said to have been waived off searching office for secret records. So that's one of the things that's going on. And of course, there's some back and forth between DeSantis and Trump, as Trump is now saying DeSantis is to blame for Disney becoming woke as he praised Erdogan. So that is one of the things that we are seeing all in that space. And I'm going to have to ask Sasha about the other things that I saw related to Ukraine and Russia, because apparently the Russians are actually going to go after one of our political leaders and all in that space. They've actually issued an arrest warrant for Lindsey Graham. I doubt very seriously that that's going to hold up, but we'll see what other folks have to say about that, because apparently they are saying some stuff that was misleadingly edited and all in that space, but they have actually gone out and issued a arrest warrant after his Ukrainian comments and all of that. And of course, we did have folks that were doing various celebrations, including us here for Memorial Day. We did air the Memorial Day parade as well as a concert for Memorial Day as well. So we aired, I think, the entirety of the parade and all in that space. So if you did not watch it, we knows we may play it again sometime during the week, but it did feature even some folks from North Carolina, like Athens Drive and a number of others as well. So it definitely featured some North Carolina representation as well as a representation from Canada. I mean, not so much Canada, but California, New Jersey, and a number of other places. And I'm sure there was probably somebody that was representing Canada there in one form or another. But I have to go back and watch the clip and see if that is the case or not the case. But I do know that they said that they had a lot of folks that were representing various countries at that event that was on Constitution Avenue in DC. It was actually sponsored partially by Kuwait, because Kuwait was glad to have been freed by our soldiers. So they actually were a sponsor of the event, as was Epic Time. And I know here at Pod TV, we do have a relationship through Rex Lee and others with Epic Time. So it was good to see them being represented as well. And they did talk about the freedom of press and that being an important part of what the U.S. is all about as well. So we're going to get to some other news stories, including a cruise ship bouncing around in the ocean and a number of other things. Years ago, talking to a construction person, and they were telling me that a lot of times the construction of today is not as good as the construction in the past. And I'm sure that that may be the case even what happened in Iowa. But I'd love to hear folks' thoughts about the nature of our construction and the nature of our business here in terms of how we build things, because apparently we're not building them as strong as we used to. And it'll be interesting to see what my fellow panelists have to say about that, because I do remember talking to a contractor and he shared with me some of his thoughts in that regards. So that was a partial building collapse in Davenport, Iowa, and it is leaving folks desperate for answers and all in that space. But definitely that is one of the things that we are seeing in the news and among the news stories. But like I said, I'd love to hear from my fellow panelists and see what they've got to say as well. So Lee Newton Rose and Dan Worthington and Sasha Starr are here. We've also got Shaquille. I'm not sure where Shaquille's at because he's in a different kind of space, but he's trying to get himself situated, and we may bring him up at some point or another. He's waving, so I guess he's ready and all in that line. So I'll bring up Shaquille and see what he's got to say from that part of the world. And I'm not sure if he's down under or in New Zealand or where he's at exactly on this particular time, since he is oftentimes doing that whole world travel thing and all along that kind of space. But I guess the first question I've got to get to folks is, oh, well, I got two questions, both for Nick, since he is one of the bosses of this network. How concerned should we be about buildings and all of that? Because I do remember when a apartment area was being renovated here in Durham, and I had that pleasure. They were telling me that a lot of times the sheetrock and some of the other stuff that is done to put up the apartments are not as always up to code as we would like to think that they are, and that a good storm could blow them just all apart and all in that space. But you used to be part of a homeowners association, so I was wondering your thoughts about the nature of construction in the United States and around the world.
Well, I think in general, we saw Davenport collapse. We saw the South Beach collapse. We saw bridges collapse. So there may be a trend here. It's rare, but it does happen. And, it's something on older buildings, older bridges, and things of that nature, as you would say, in that space, Mark, that we should be concerned about. But housing in general is a big problem in the United States, that we do not have affordable housing in the U.S. It is, so anybody's thinking about moving here, I don't know why they'd want to come here. It's pretty expensive to live here right now. So you have to do something about the housing issue in the United States. I pulled demographics, and you'll love this one. 60% of the population in the United States rent. It goes to the same 60% who can't get $400 in the event of emergency, or 40%. 40% of the people own, and of the 40%, 40% of them do not have mortgages on their house. They own it outright. So if you think that there is a skewing of the monetary climate to the upper 10, 20%, you're absolutely right. They keep quiet about it. The news media doesn't mention that. But in California, 33%, you'll love this, own their houses outright with no mortgages, the most expensive real estate market in the nation. Now, again, we keep quiet about it. When we see these $1 million homes get sold for, and somebody buys another $1 million, all they're doing is trading their equity in on $1 million home for another $1 million home. So here's the realities of the United States of America, like it or not. The rich people have all the money, and the poor people are all broke. So we really have two classes in the United States. You have the rich, and you have the poor, and that's it. So that's
Shaquille, what are your thoughts about this? You've done investments, you've done things,
and there's very little mobility. So if you're in the poor and you think you're going to become rich, forget it. If you're rich and you think you could be a poor, that could actually take place more likely. It could take place, but also is a very rare event. So what we have is really, we have stagnant classes. And the media doesn't want to mention it because the media is controlled by the rich, not the poor. Poor have no say-so in the United States. They're just given this say-so. So housing collapses. Yeah, it's probably owned by some rich demagogue who won't come forward and is basically a slumlord like Donald Trump's dad. And he doesn't care. He's got it insured. It goes down. So what? So that's housing in America. I hope you enjoy it.
You're in the investment space, and you've done some investments, I think, even on some properties. But what is your thoughts around the nature of housing, both here in the United States as well as around the world? We did have this building that collapsed in Iowa. I told folks earlier that I talked to somebody that was doing some renovations before the pandemic, and they were concerned about the nature of the building and told me that a good headwind could probably tear down this new development that had come up here in the what we call the Bull City, Durham area, and all of that. But what is your take on housing and the way housing is put up these days, both here and worldwide?
I noticed Nick has dropped those bombshells and run away as usual. Mr. Trust Fund baby over there telling the rest of us about the sort of the class that's not being able to move. Look, it's always sad when you see human life being lost to destruction and properties collapsing, things like that. That's always sad. But just moving past that point, clearly infrastructure in general in the United States has been a problem for quite a long time. And Joe Biden and the Democrats have tried to address some of that with some of their plans. Hopefully that'll make some level of difference. Certainly, government regulation and oversight over these things may also help to improve the conditions moving forward. You can't do much about what's happened in the past, but you can certainly do something to change things in the future. But you need to have sensible regulations. You need to have sensible oversight. You don't want to over-regulate people and hold back progress. As far as housing affordability, obviously New York and California and some of those states, even Florida now, housing is not affordable to most people. But that's not the whole country. You've got 50 states there, and a lot of those countries have much more affordable housing, but you don't earn as much when you're there, and it's a totally different lifestyle. So people kind of have to make a choice, and unfortunately for my generation, the millennials on the cusp of Gen X, we don't have the same ability to buy properties that our parents and grandparents did. That might mean that we have to make sacrifices such as buying cheaper properties or renting until we can afford to get on the property ladder. But I don't think it's an insurmountable challenge. And the idea that the classes don't move just simply isn't true. We know that most of the people that are in the top 10% or even top 1% will drop out of that over time. They might come back in, but they'll drop out and they'll come back in. And most of the people in the bottom 10, 20%, if you look at where they are in 20 years from now, very few of them are still there. So there is mobility, but I think we do have to address issues on how the poorest people in our community are faring and what their opportunities are to get ahead. And of course, we have to make sure that the middle class isn't being squeezed. And that's why I talk about tax rates and things like that, because high marginal rates of tax isn't a very good way, in my opinion, to solve this problem, because you actually end up hurting the middle class and not actually getting much more out of the very wealthy. So it just requires proper government thinking and proper politics. Unfortunately, I think in Western countries and really around the world, getting politicians to do what's actually going to be more likely to work than not is a real challenge. Politicians tend to look after themselves. And to answer your question, yes, I am jet setting again around the world. I'm back in Kenya. I'll be flying back to Dubai in the next couple of days, and then I'll be visiting another 3 or 4 African countries before I go back to London and Switzerland.
Sorry, Shaquille, I'm sorry. Follow up. You just mentioned that this is not the way you would do it. How would you do it if you could change the taxation or whatever it is to solve the problem or to help relieve the middle class?
So in the first place, I think that, and I think I'm joined by most economists on this. You need to have a broad-based taxation system. Now, consumption taxes are a good way of doing that in a country like England or the United Kingdom more generally, in Australia, because it's a lot easier to roll that out. In America, I think it'd be a little bit harder because obviously you're a much bigger country. You've got 50 states. You have different state rules. But even Bill Gates talks about a progressive consumption tax being the way to do it. I think that a progressive, it doesn't even have to be aggressive, but I think that a broad-based tax system is going to work better. And what I would do is I'd make the benefit system regressive, because clearly the wealthiest people in the community are more able to pay for their own things. And I don't want to weigh in too much on the healthcare, but just to kind of use that as an example, I don't think that universal healthcare or single payer healthcare in the United States would be a very good idea for the United States. It has its positives and its negatives in other countries. I don't think the existing medical infrastructure in the United States would easily switch over to that type of a system. So I think that looking at all the systems that I've ever seen around the world, the Switzerland-based system is probably the most likely to work in the US, which is where everybody's required to have private health insurance, but if you can't afford it, it's provided for you. So that's a way of actually making that regressive. The benefit would be regressive. If you can't afford it, it's given to you. If you can afford it, then you get less of a subsidy or no subsidy at all. There are other issues with your healthcare system as well about health insurers not paying out claims and things like that, but that can be dealt with by a central clearinghouse. But those are some of the sorts of things that I'd be looking at, because simply saying, well, the rich aren't paying enough tax, so instead of having the top marginal rate at 35%, we're going to take it to 45% or 55% or whatever arbitrary number that you pull out of the sky. The reality is that the very wealthy, you've got teams of accountants and lawyers, and they'll just change the way they earn money, and then they're not going to be earning an income. And what that means is that the people that are already wealthy, right, they get to get an increase in their net wealth because their assets have increased in value. They can borrow money against their assets and buy more assets if they want to. And all of that happens in the tax-free space because it's borrowing against an asset. Whereas poorer people and middle-class people, if they've got a great business idea and they make a whole heap of money in one particular year, they might have had 10 years where they weren't making anything or losing money, but they can't carry back their losses for all those 10 years. They might have had personal losses that weren't business losses while they were trying to make their idea work. All of a sudden, they make a whole heap of money. And before they get the chance to reinvest all of that, they get hit with this really high tax rate. And when they say, well, look, I'm just making this up, I earned $3 million last year and the government's coming for close to half of it, everyone says, well, boo-hoo, you're still left with $1.5 million, so stop complaining. It's not really an issue about whether they should be paying. It's, well, what about the person that's worth $10 million who had a 30% increase in their asset base, who's worth $3 million more than what they were worth last year, but because it's been an asset value increase, they're not paying any tax on that, and they still get to borrow the money, they still get to have the same sort of lifestyle, and they're in a similar, if not better, economic position. I think that type of tax system with those high progressive rates of tax actually hurts businesses, small businesses, and it hurts the middle class and what I call the aspiring class more than it hurts people that have already made the money.
Hey, Jacoby, really quick question and everything, because one thing
I agree
about that, Shaquille actually kind of alluded to it earlier when he was talking about Gen Z and some of the younger folks, is that sometimes when you talk to the younger community and everything, they are in areas that they have had family wealth. There's that whole conversation around generational wealth, but I don't know that they always are excited about the generational wealth they have and are always wanting to maintain that generational wealth. We know a number of folks that are in the coastal areas and have migrated away from the fishing community and want nothing to do with fishing. We know people that are in the farm communities that want nothing to do with the farm, even though they might have some very good wealth building assets from keeping that land in their family. So I just wondering your thoughts around generational wealth and whether that plays a part in this conversation as well, because I'm also not sure that we are always of the opinion to maintain our wealth, because I know that in my family we've done that, but I've also seen some people that have let their land slide by and all in that space. But I just wondering your thoughts.
So, in terms of that generational wealth and, individuals holding on to land and so on and so forth, I mean, it does play into it because you have the system that we have in play is that capitalist system. And so you have those big players that come in and pay for those. I guess that's what you're alluding to, is those big companies come in. Those individuals who have this land that they can't take care of anymore, they sell that off, and they lose their generational wealth in that sense because it becomes such an expense that they aren't able to control or maintain. So then that does lead into what Shaq was talking about in terms of, potentially lead into, individuals coming into that great amount of money and then, losing whatever because they can't reinvest into whatever they want. However, there are areas that can be taxed. I think that tax-free zone, one thing that Shaq talked about, yes, wealthy individuals will shift their money around, so it's tougher to tax them, but that is the tax-free zone that we need to regulate and actually tax and get that money from, because what you're basically saying is that we shouldn't tax them, but I think we should, because that's, you have those millions and billionaires that do that shell game, and that's money that should be taxed. That's where that investment in the IRS came into play, where it got demonized by one side, saying that they were hiring 87,000 individuals to come after your taxes, and it was going to attack the middle class and stuff like that. That actually wasn't what that money was spent for, and nobody was ever going to hire 87,000 people. It was an easy boogeyman for people to fall for, because there are antiquated systems that they needed to be upgraded. That money has to pay for that. There are individuals that need to be in place, not 87,000, but there are individuals that need to be in place because those rich that play those shell games, you have to have somebody on the other side to follow. And how we talk about how, hey, we want to follow the money. Well, that's what those individuals were there to do, because people play those shell games, and you can't hide your taxes in different places if you have individuals that can track and trace those things. So taxes are one big thing. But I think one area that we miss, and we talk about, because taxes, we have to understand that we're in a time and place where we have the lowest taxes, and we're always having the most problems. We're always complaining about the federal deficit. We're always complaining about this and that and the other thing. Well, the years prior, we had higher taxation, and we had more mobility for the middle class. We had more opportunity for the middle class. So taxes aren't a bad thing. We've just demonized them and made them into a bad thing.
Jacoby?
I was just going to finish off with one of the big things that we haven't talked about is that where the regulation needs to come into play to avoid these housing crises that we keep running into. Predatory lending is where a lot of problems come into play. And that's what's affecting the middle and lower class. And that's why there's really no mobility, is because you have these predatory lenders that go ahead and force an individual to sign a loan that they know they can't pay for. So when the bank comes calling, what ends up happening? That bank, they have to drop whatever they had, and they're done. You have people going into default on loans, losing their homes, getting their homes bought by the bank under their noses. Did you know that I don't know if we talked about it or not, but you know that your housing authority or your local housing authority that you join into can actually buy your home from underneath you if you don't deal with your housing authority stuff. So there are just so many problems with our housing system that need to be regulated, and that's what causes a lot of problems. So taxes is one thing, but predatory lending and, the unregulated, your homeowners association, that's what I'm talking about. Your homeowners associations that, have just tons of leverage. When you buy into a neighborhood, yes, they can buy your home from you and you don't even know.
Sorry, Jacoby, can I just quickly say something? I don't know whether you may have slightly misunderstood what I said, or perhaps I misspoke. But when you were replying, you said that I had said that certain things shouldn't be taxed. That's not what I'm saying. It's actually what you're saying is what I'm saying, is that you've got a certain group of people, and it's generally people that already have money that are using, as you've described it, these shell games to avoid having to pay tax on money they would otherwise have to pay tax on. Whilst other people who are new money, who are just earning that money right now, don't have access to those mechanisms or those structures, and they're having to pay a much higher portion of their taxes than somebody else in the same economic position. So I just want to clarify with you, I'm not saying that they shouldn't be paying taxes. I'm saying that they should be. And I think that in order to make them pay taxes, you're going to have to overhaul the tax system. And it's not just in the United States. I can't really weigh in on whether 87,000 IRS agents is a good or bad idea for the United States. To me, it sounds terrible because I'd hate to see that happen in Australia, but we have 1/10 your population. So, you know what I mean? That's a domestic issue for you guys, but I'm talking about more broadly. And I'm also talking about internationally. The fact of the matter is that if I, as an international person, was to invest in the United States, let's say that I buy an investment property and you happen to buy the investment property right next door to mine, you'll be subject to taxes that I may not have to pay, that I might be exempt from. And I don't think that that's particularly fair on Americans. So that's what I'm talking about when I say an overhaul of the tax system would require broad-based taxes that everybody has to pay into, that you can't easily just sort of use funny structures and get out of paying.
Yeah, just to point out, 87,000 was just a boogeyman number that one political party decided that they were going to scare their people with, so they'd vote against it. That's not a real thing. It was a fictional thing.
Yeah, but I think the issue that we're discussing now is taxes, right? Not whether not the
actually, it wasn't a boogeyman. It was the funding was intended to bring on that many people.
It was a completely false statement. So we can't.
No. Actually, they were intending to hire that many.
No, they weren't.
IRS people. Yeah.
I'll be right back.
Well, according to them, I mean, I don't know.
No one said that.
There are two tax lawyers sitting on this panel. There's one next to me. The trust baby, and then there's me, who's more middle class and not a trust baby. Oh yeah, you are.
Nobody said that. Nobody was
also
hiring
descending from royalty, so you can.
So we're both tax lawyers. We've actually read what the president has proposed in the Green Book. We've actually read what what I mean. So I mean, we know a little bit more about this maybe than you do, Jacoby.
Nobody was hired. No, absolutely no company is going to hire. And this is taking away from not even talking about the federal government. An 87,000 person hire is impossible for any company or any federal government at this point in time at one central location.
Well, See, that's where you're mistaken. They can.
You can get a job at the IRS, just as long as you can breathe. You're hired.
But nobody was hiring 87.
Yeah, it's a
not for 87.
Yeah, you want a
six
figure income. You go work for the IRS.
I mean, what Biden did to the Pension Benefit Guaranty Corporation was horrible. He way overfunded it. I'm dealing with audits all the time that are just incredibly stupid. Now I got to go tell my client we're going to waste more time on this stupid PBGC audit. It'll be the same thing with the IRS and their horrible tax system. It just continues. I mean,
they'll have more guys. They'll have more guys with guns.
The saddest thing to me when I look at two countries that I'm fairly close to, which is the United States, where I'm not a citizen, but I obviously earn a lot of money from the United States, and Australia, where I am a citizen. One of the saddest things that I see is that in the United States, you have one of the most progressive taxation systems in the Western world, certainly in the OECD. But you only take 25% of GDP. So oftentimes when I hear Americans talking about the things that they want or things that, I always hear this argument, I often push back against it, hear this argument, the Democrats or the left will say, we want more socialism and the capitalists are just running off with all the money. And you have the Republicans saying, well, if you let the socialists come in, we're all going to be in Venezuela, we're not going to have toilet paper. The argument really is about having some level of redistribution of wealth and making sure that people at the bottom are receiving enough benefits to be able to let them be comfortable. Well, the saddest thing that I see is that with these ridiculously high, in my opinion, ridiculously high progressive rates of tax that you have in the United States, you only take about 25% of the GDP. In Australia, it's 27, 28%. These are the two lowest rates in Western countries. Most countries are taking 30 to 33%. So if you talk about the deficits that you have in the United States or some of the programs that people talk about, such as healthcare, education, perhaps more funding for low-cost housing for homeless people and for underserved communities, you would be able to do that if you had a tax rate or a tax system that generated revenue similar to what most of the peer group of the United States generates, but you don't. And then when I hear the arguments in the United States, people go, "Well, just tax the rich." Okay, fine. I'm with that. And I'm wealthier than the average person. I'm prepared to pay a little bit more. Not in America, obviously, I'm not a citizen there, but I'm prepared to pay a little bit more. I think that's an obligation that we have. But it's how we're paying a bit more. If you could turn around and slap me with a 100% income tax, it's not going to affect me at all because I don't earn income. I earn money in other ways. So that's why when they say tax the rich and they come out with these statements of, I'm going to have a 90% tax rate, that's ridiculous.
It is.
And of course, and to go back to my example before, if you've got somebody who's worked really hard for 10 years on a business idea, they've been working full time, and they've got this business idea on the side, and then all of a sudden their business idea takes off, and they make $100 million that year, they're going to lose half of that to tax. Nobody's going to feel sorry for them. But a billionaire who also earned $100 million because their assets increased by $100 million pays nothing, borrows the money, and then goes and buys it and reinvests in other investments. This is just not it's not a fair tax system, because people in similar economic positions should be contributing similar amounts. I don't understand why you wouldn't want to have that system.
No, not a flat tax. That'd be crazy. You have to have a progressive tax rate, because then you're talking about.
I didn't say flat tax, Toby. I didn't say flat tax.
I didn't hear him say that.
I said
that people who are in similar economic positions should be contributing similar amounts. That's what I'm saying. So if I've earned 100 million and you've earned 100 million, whatever tax rate you pay should be about the same as what I pay.
See, the problem with that, Shaquille, is that a lot of the wealth is gained, what they call unrealized capital gains.
Yeah, that's right.
Let's go beat up Elon Musk, for example. Oh, he's worth 200 billion. Not really. We looked at his stock. His stock was overvalued. I mean, he was 1,000 times price earnings, and so it pushed up his net worth. But he doesn't have the 200 billion. When he bought Twitter, he had to go borrow the money from his rich people like Larry Ellison, who actually does have the money, to buy Twitter. He borrowed all that money because, frankly, he didn't have it all. But
there again, Nick, is part of the problem, because I hear people like Elizabeth Warren and others. I hear people like Elizabeth Warren and others around the world, but I'll just name American ones because you're all American except for Sasha. That say, well, what we should do then is we should tax unrealized capital gains. Well, that works really well when the market goes up. But what happens when the market goes back down? Are you going to refund that? Are you going to let them carry the losses forward? I mean, this is not a sustainable way of doing it either.
That is a big problem. But one other problem we have in the United States, I believe everybody in this panel, when you were in high school, you never took a class in real estate investing. You never took a class in stock and bond investing. And we all know wealth is based on real estate predominantly and stocks and bonds. Our education system failed everybody. And putting more money in the education system doesn't help, because you're still teaching the wrong classes. So Nick, actually quite the opposite.
Right. Nick, actually quite the opposite. When we talk about government regulation, the biggest problem that we're seeing in really around the world, the biggest problem we're seeing in Western countries is that regulation isn't being, and legislations aren't being written for the people. It's being done by lobby groups. It's being done by big corporations that will try to take every advantage that they can take. Why would you, if you're a company that you want to employ people at minimum wage, why would you want the school system to teach these people how to be independently wealthy? You want to teach these people how to get a job. And this is even the criticism at the moment for kids coming through college. You just want to teach them how to get a job. You don't want to teach them how to be rich.
That's what I'm saying. Our education system, Shaquille, is failing our students, okay? Because they're teaching them the wrong thing. When Kiboshashi and Lecter, who's been on our show before, co-authored Rich Dad, Poor Dad, they were heading the right direction on how to make money in the real estate market. Stocks and bond investing, I never took it because they don't offer stock and bond investing. All the stuff that Shaquille, when it comes to investing, and so does Sasha, they don't teach at all in our classes. All they're training people to do in classes in the United States is to become an employee of some company. And that's it. In other words, do as you're told, but let's not train you how to accumulate any money and how
that's exactly the case. And the thing is that people when they look at property investing, people get these theories because, like, one, across the Western world, more millionaires are created because of real estate than anything else. That is true. Right. But most people think, that they fall for these slogans which says, well, they're not building any more land, and so this is a good way to grow wealth. The major reason why people are making so much money in real estate, the major two reasons is, one, because they're able to access quite a lot of leverage because the banks will loan the money because it's against a hard asset, and two, because of government subsidies or government tax treatment. If you can deduct the amortization against your income, go for it.
Hey, Shaquille, here, hold on a
1031s
second.
and 1034s.
Let me jump in.
Everybody on this
Hold on a
audience
second,
should
Shaquille.
know about. Hold on a minute, Mark. Everybody in this audience should know about 1031 exchanges and 1034 exchanges, right? I know
right.
Lee knows. I know Dan Worthington knows, but does everybody else here know? 1031, 1034. No,
So,
Yeah.
they don't teach it. It's a basic way that you go from real estate to real estate and not pay taxes.
So
Right.
the one thing, the
But
major
Nick,
problem that we
Nick, hold on a second. We're also
Go
talking
ahead,
about the debt ceiling and everything, which is a whole debate that's going on. How many people on this panel, or even definitely in general, that are watching now or watching it in replay and everything, had any course on debt ceilings, either their personal debt ceilings or debt ceilings in general? So I kind of agree with you that that is something that is not taught, that should be taught in everything, because I don't remember any courses about debt ceiling, and I hear people talking about it all day long.
It's artificial. It's artificial.
Yeah, it
what's
is
really
artificial.
interesting though.
It is. I mean,
What-
we haven't. Okay, we're producing more taxes in the federal government at this time than any other time in our history. We are generating more taxes than in any time in our history. Our problem is that we need to slow down the spending and be fiscally responsible
See,
about how things are spent across the board. Across the
Here's-
board.
here's the interesting thing. And I think this is where our old time thinking is not keeping up with the new time world. The problem is we're taking in a lot more taxes. Yes, true. We're also not the number one nation with the highest tax rate. We have a lower tax rate than a lot of other nations. And we keep dropping our taxes down. We do have a growing population and an aging population. So we need a lot more money to pay for the aging population. We're talking about also that we need education and financial literacy. What pays for that? That comes out of our taxes. So if we're going to complain that we take in all this money and won't invest in these classes and complain that students aren't educated, well, we're part of that problem. We're the ones saying that we cannot invest in education because it doesn't do anything, but these kids don't learn anything because we're already saying that we're not going to invest in that area.
One word: YouTube. You can learn anything on YouTube right now. If
So
you
you
want to
want
know
a bunch
about it,
of
go
users
search.
Toby, I don't think that's what people are saying at all. I think that people like Dan and Lee are saying that that these things should be funded, and they don't like the way that government is spending money at the moment. That's what they're saying.
No, but listen,
They're not saying that education shouldn't be funded. I've not heard either of them
Education
say
will
that.
be
listen to
funded.
what I'm saying, though.
It's important. Yeah.
I'm saying that we need to fund education. All these classes that we are talking about, that we want to have and want students to learn, that is investment in education.
Not
We
all
just-
education is good though.
Okay. So
Sorry, my American
here.
history class will not make me rich. I love history.
But the thing is,
My
the
world
American history class is
will
an
not
important
do me any
class.
good. I love
If
history.
you
No, but
if
that's
you're trained to be a
that's what the
W-2 employee,
these
you're
classes
selling
are
yourself into
important.
slavery.
Ain't gonna help.
You need to be
history will
self-employed to create
it
your own
will help
business.
in the future, because if we don't, if we
No, real estate investing, or I
Need to be-
learned how to invest like Shaq and Shaquille did.
here's a question.
That'll
Nick.
help me.
Are
Not-
you
not-
saying
not-
that
not learning about
is
the
learning history important?
Western stuff.
Oh yeah.
So if we can agree that learning history is important, then we can't say
Learning
that we
chess
don't
is
need.
important, Jatobi. Why don't we
So
teach
these
chess?
are
A lot of
important.
stuff is
Then
important.
we need
but
to
it
add
doesn't
other
really make a
classes,
difference.
correct?
You know?
Chess is important. Yeah.
Chess is important.
We're
Why don't
talking-
we teach chess in school?
Marching
You can
band
make
is
an
important.
argument. Everything's important.
No, but see, I would argue.
Is
I'd have to
real
argue
estate.
the opposite of that, Jatobi.
what you're saying
I'd argue the opposite of that.
Take it as an elective act.
I would argue the opposite of that, Toby. I wouldn't say that history is important in and of itself. I think that what you need to have is an education system that drills down on the talents, individual talents and interests that students have. We have a top-down approach, right? So I was a very good chess player when I was a youngster. I'm still roughly the same level of chess. I mean, Sasha's brought me up a little bit, but I'm about the same level of chess as what I was when I was 14 or 15 years old. But I was forced to play volleyball. I hated volleyball, right? I was forced to do art. Now, is art important? Of course it is. But I can tell you that I can't even draw a stick figure and have someone know what I drew because I absolutely suck at art. So, yeah, history can be important, but why do we want to force students that don't have any interest in history, that might be, for example, really talented in physics or really talented in some other subject, to study a subject that they're not interested in, that they don't like, that they're bored with? Why do we want to do that?
So,
hold on a second, Shaquille, are we going to dismiss
kids to go through history all the way through college? Are we?
Sorry, I missed that, Jacoby. What Mark was saying.
Because when you're saying forcing kids, are we forcing kids to go K through 12 and even through college through history if they don't enjoy history?
It depends on their requirements.
I'm not suggesting that, but we are doing it. We are doing it in primary and high schools, or elementary, middle, and high schools there. And I can tell you, I know here in Australia, I know the same thing in the United States. I've had people in my life that have studied things like medicine. Okay, most of my family are in medicine, who have had to do things like ethics, or they've had to do things like, like something random that really didn't have anything to do. Like general ethics when it comes to the finance system has nothing to do with your delivery of the healthcare system.
When did they learn ethics?
Right?
Wait a minute.
It was one of the mandatory modules that they had to complete at university. And this is what happened. So universities had the courses with stuff that you don't really need to know. So look, trade schools do it too. Trade schools do it as well. If you want to be an apprentice chef, it shouldn't take you 4 years to get there, but you're going to have to spend a year washing dishes and all this other crap before you actually get to learn what you need to learn.
So you're saying ethics aren't important in any class.
Toby, if you want to mischaracterize what I've said, you're welcome to do so.
What I'm saying is you're saying that that they're forcing kids.
Jacoby, I was very specific. Jacoby, I was very specific, and I said they had to do a course on ethics as it related to finance. And I don't see why that would have any bearing at all on that person's ability to be a medical practitioner. But Jacoby, as I said, if you want to mischaracterize what I've said, you go for it.
You can't say that ethics is not important for finance, or that's predatory lending is based off of doing something ethically wrong. So
what does that have to do with it? What does that have to do with a nurse or a dentist or a doctor?
So you're saying that a nurse doesn't need to know about ethics? That's a class that they're having nurses.
No, that's Jacoby, that's not what I said. And again, if what you want to do is to mischaracterize what I've said and then act as though you're bewildered by it, you're welcome to do that. But that's not what I said. And I don't think that there's any other panelist here that thinks that that's what I said.
That's not what he said. That's not what
he said. Shaquille and Jacoby, hold on a second. Shaquille and Jacoby, quick question. Because you did mention the thing about history and the nature of history, but there are two great quotes that I am very much aware of and everything. One from Winston Churchill, and I'm sure that Sasha would even agree with this, which is that a nation that forgets its past has no future, because they've forgotten their past. And then George Santayana made that whole quote about those who do not learn their history are doomed to repeat it. So I do think that you have to have some knowledge of history and everything, because otherwise you might just go back into that notion of repeating the past mistakes that were already made.
In my opinion, history is probably the most important thing what people of all levels, professions, and level of education have to learn, because if you really go, what history is teaching people is teaching about how different nationalities, people, races, continents reacted to certain events throughout all recorded history, how they reacted to the same thing 5,000 years ago, 3,000 years ago, 1,000 years ago, where these driving forces coming from, why one nation reacts a certain way to the same event and the other one different way, maybe completely different way. And all you can find out only through learning history. I'm not suggesting that you have attended all the classes in universities and so on. Even on YouTube, you can find a lot of really important history. Actually, YouTube is a very practical way to learn history as well, because they just show you in video, in sounds, and so on, different things. For example, why Sparta had fought Athens in ancient Greece, what they were fighting for. And Athens is basically a cradle of today's civilization. Now, I would like to point out that not everybody enjoys learning history. Not everybody has capacity to learn history. That's a problem. And I can't suggest how you can make someone study history if he hates it and he has. But this has something to do with one of the major attributes, in my opinion, for success in business and in life is a curiosity. And the curiosity is a major force why European civilization became so successful, because they were curious to find out what's happening on the east of Europe or the west of Europe or so on. Chinese were much richer people at the time, much more developed than 15th century Europeans. But they had no curiosity to venture beyond their borders. They had care only of what's happened inside of China. They didn't care about what's happened right next to China in different countries. Even if it's Asia, they didn't care what's happened in the rest of Asia and so on. So, and now you could see where Europe ventured. Let's see, 100 years ago, Europe was miles away from China. Now China is trying to go to...
Sasha, where was Genghis Khan from?
Sorry?
Where was Genghis Khan
I think
from?
he was from Mongolia. But
which
Sasha,
is part of China, and what did Genghis Khan go and doing all kinds of adventures all over the world and everything? So I can't say that China.
I missed something. You were talking about Genghis Khan, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Genghis Khan, by the way, if you don't know, I'll tell you, he was born on the territory of the former Soviet Union, just 8 kilometers south of the Lake Baikal. So you might as well call Putin is definitely a distant student of Genghis Khan.
Well,
Not
speaking
the
of
best
that,
one, but
speaking of that, you had also mentioned earlier YouTube University and Google University and how everybody can learn off of those. And I'm not saying that they are not some valuable things that you can't learn off of that, but there's a lot of misinformation in those sources as well. I could literally create a YouTube channel today that swore up and down that Shaquille was the direct descendant of Attila the Hun and was planning to take over the United States tomorrow, and there would be no verification as to whether that was the truth or not. Am I not right, Jacoby? Could I not do that?
But see, what you can do is you can have somebody review the YouTube videos for consumption purposes and education. Then you can fire all the teachers and replace them with a series of verified YouTube videos.
Okay.
Well, let me just say, Mark, you can try that. I have enough.
Okay.
I have enough political and business contacts.
The idea of learning history from YouTube.
Save a lot of money.
Now, what?
So, Mark, I can tell you that you can do that, but I have enough business and political contacts to be able to have that taken down pretty quickly. To Sasha's point, look, learning history, I think, is important as well. But what I'm saying is that some students don't want to do it. What's the point of forcing it into the school curriculum? You know, we're already seeing kids falling behind in maths and English and science skills. You know, let's get those kids that are naturally talented and interested in that and promote that with them. Kids that have got interest in other areas, promote those other areas with them. But having this top-down approach like this means that a lot of kids, that they don't like doing some subjects, and oftentimes they drop out of school because they don't like it.
No, they drop out of school not because they don't like it.
As I said before, if
some of them do
lack curiosity they will fail in many areas. I'm not talking about classes of history. I'm talking about generally, if you have no curiosity, how can you be successful in arts and politics and just anywhere? So maybe those who have no curiosity, I'm sorry to say, should be segregated to a different level of learning in school, as not to impede those people who are curious and who want to learn as much as possible.
But Sasha, curiosity, scientific curiosity is a different field. Albert Einstein was not a great historian, but he was a fantastic physicist and scientist. He spent most of his time dedicated to the study of physics and that sort of thing. Do you think that if you asked him to study 15th century history of France, that he'd have been interested? No, he was interested in maths and science.
No.
So
I would not agree with that, because if you take many people like Leonardo da Vinci, they were great scientists and artists and sculptors. Just anything.
So I think Shaq,
I take it that you guys don't agree with me, that you guys would prefer to see school kids be forced to study things that they don't want to study. That's what you think is a recipe for success.
Here's the communication.
Then why are you all,
communication that you're missing.
Hold on a second. Let's hear from Jacoby.
The communication mix-up that you're missing. Every course, for example, art, there's history in art. So you need to learn about art history. We wouldn't know about Picasso and others. If you were taking art, you wouldn't learn about Van Gogh and all. You need to learn those where post-impressionist artwork came from, goth style, and so on and so forth. That's part of your course. If you're taking about medical stuff, you're going to have to learn about the histrionics behind who created the first heart transplant. That's all history. When we're talking about generalized history, I think that's
why would you have to learn that? Why would you have to learn who implanted the first heart in order to be a heart surgeon? I don't disagree that it would be part of the course, but why would you need to know that to be a heart surgeon?
You need to learn everything about
you don't need to know, and frankly, you don't need to know art
Nick,
at all.
you're a lawyer.
Like
you
art.
need to know about the precedents of law.
Art, you and
Nick,
my friend.
You're in law. Do you need to know about the precedents in law?
Jacoby, we've had panels. We've had panels on here where I have quoted precedent law that those lawyers didn't know. I've stumped almost every lawyer that's been on here by quoting precedents that they don't know. So what do they do when they've got a case? They go and research it. They get their paralegals to do all the work.
A lawyer doesn't need to know about history and precedent.
But what I'm saying, if you're in law, you don't need to know the history of art. Okay, I mean, it's just
no. We're not talking about the history of art. We're talking about the history of law.
With the development
of
the
history of law,
intelligence. Now I heard very interesting program. I forgot what. That actually people don't need to know anything, because artificial intelligence will tell them everything about
AI is even very inaccurate.
Well, actually, I read over the weekend. I read over the weekend, and I'd love to have an answer from Dan Worthington and Nick Palavina about this. That a lawyer filed a case, asked for GPT to write up the submission. He never checked, and it actually created completely fake, completely made up case law, and submitted it to the court. And now he's up with disciplinary action. But I actually don't think this has been tested. What happens when you've relied on, computer assistance? It's created a bad result. What disciplinary action exists within the Bar Association rules? I have no idea. Nick and Dan, please weigh in on this. I think this is really interesting.
I like your idea of student-centered curriculum. We don't have that in the United States. We have a crammed down curriculum, but if we switched it to a student-centered curriculum, find out the talents of the student individual,
we don't have the money for it
around them, you might come out with a better product than you do right now.
But we don't have.
Who just said? Sorry, who just said we don't have the money for it? Who just said that?
I did.
Toby. Yeah, Toby.
Okay. So can I just say, Jacoby, and I've actually looked at this across the Western world. The per capita cost, or the per student cost of education, if it was provided by more efficient organizations, such as private organizations, they don't have to be for profit, they could be charitable organizations.
We're in a capitalist
This
system,
wouldn't cost
no
that much. You could get 4 or 5 families together and get independent tutors to teach those kids. And it would come at a similar cost to the taxpayer of delivering that education, and they would get better results. And proof of that is if you have a look at the very, very wealthy people around the world who actually pay for private tutors for their kids. I believe I read something before where the average age for them to graduate high school is 13. They are amongst the highest graduates of the International Baccalaureate. And the price to those parents is similar to what the price would have been had they had it from public education, and that's because of government waste.
Shaq, you just said very wealthy. We have a different system here. We, as Nick pointed out at the top, you have the very rich and you have the very poor. How are you going to take?
You've once again just misquoted, mischaracterized what I've said. Okay, the average cost of educating a student across any income bracket would be about the same as having private tutors.
This has been proven. There was a set of very wealthy individuals who did this. You literally just said that. And
again, to tell me, look, again, if you want to mischaracterize the things that I say, if that makes you feel happy, you go for it. But no, you took a fragment of what I said. That's how I said. Let's ask the panel. Dan, Nick, Lee. Is that what I said, or did I say more?
You didn't. What you're saying.
I mean, it's just.
Toby, we can continue this debate later and everything. I was going to just mention an event. Nick,
Mark, let me answer this question.
To wrap up, but Nick, I was going to mention something that you'll be glad to hear about. I don't know that Shaquille's going to be glad to hear about this, and we can debate it on tomorrow's Toby. You can join it as well. But there is going to be a 3-state visit about raising the federal minimum wage that is going to feature Bernie Sanders and William Barber. And yes, I can say it officially because I was actually on the Zoom call last week. One of those sites that is going to be taking place is at one of the other places that I work at. So on Thursday, he will be appearing along with Nita Adams, one of our Durham County commissioners at the Hayti Heritage Center. So sometimes y'all have seen me air from the Hayti Heritage Center. So Bernie and them will be trying to get us to raise the federal minimum wage at a upcoming rally at that location at 7 p.m.
Sorry. Why would I have a problem with that?
I don't know how you feel about minimum wage and the raising of the minimum wage. We've had debates about this.
Well, but see again, and like I said to you guys the other day, right? You guys try to attribute to me the most extreme sides of conservative politics in America, right? In Australia, I'm a liberal. Let me finish. In Australia, I'm a liberal. This all started a couple of years ago when I kept asking what the policy differences were between Biden and Trump. And everyone just screamed at me that Trump was a criminal and he was the worst person in the world and all that. I said, yeah, but that's all fine and well. But what are the policy differences? And all it is because I'm not American, so I'm not a Republican and I'm not a Democrat. You guys go, well, he's not a Democrat, therefore he must be a conservative. Now, but you ignore all the times that I point out when Republican policy doesn't seem like it's going to work economically. You ignore it. All the times when I have disagreed with Dan Worthington about a whole heap of issues from abortion to gay marriage, you guys have just ignored that. And you try to depict me as being this sort of hardcore Republican right-wing person. And that's not who I am. I'm a really moderate person, pragmatic person who tries to look at the issues from both sides.
So am I.
And the fact that some of you are really, really biased and can't handle somebody just exploring the ideas is a really great reflection of you. It's not a reflection of me being a conservative, I can tell you.
And like I said, I've got things that are considered conservative as well on certain issues. But the only other thing I was going to say, the other appearances are at Fisk University on June 2nd. I think Representative Justin Jones is going to be on that. And we know he got a lot of attention because of gun control, which we never got to today and everything. And then the third rally will be at a location that I went to several years back, and that's in Charleston, South Carolina, which is the International Longshore Association's Local 1422 at their Union Hall. And I actually went to an event there, I think it was about 4 or 5 years ago, and all in that space. So it is actually a wonderful venue and all in that kind of way. But we'll see what they say when they come to town. And who knows, maybe I'll snag Bernie or Reverend Sanders into coming onto the show, if that's all right with you, Nick. And
well, perhaps they could make an appearance on Sasha's Ukrainian show, which is about to start, and talk about some of the Western help that'll be happening there and some of the updates that are happening over there.
Exactly.
Mark, I just want to comment to Toby about not having enough money in education. Our educational system is becoming very top-heavy in terms of administration, and the money not going to teachers teaching kids.
True.
Unfortunately, in my opinion.
I mean, I agree. There's a mixed bag there. There's
But Toby, if you agree, that was the point that I was making. What do you mean you agree?
Shaq, that wasn't the point that you were making.
Yes, it is.
Shaq, you're pointing to there. So let me point this out really fast because I'm gonna jump in because we got to run time because we got a Ukrainian show to get to. So Shaq, what you were saying, and this is not a misquote. You can go back and listen to how you gave an example. You started your example by saying very wealthy people. And that's where the problem came into play, is because there are a lot of people that are in the lower income and the lower level that do not have the mobility or the opportunity to do exactly what you're talking about. And this is also where the mindset from privatizing schools comes into play. And privatizing schools has a problem because you talk about how Lee just talked about the money and the problem with schools. A lot of these schools run into that capitalist idea and it becomes a money-driven thing. That's why there's one of the schools, Westwood, whatever, just ended up going bankrupt. And actually the government has to pay back the student loans that the individuals that went to Westwood College had gotten into a problem with, because Westwood was stealing money from kids. It becomes a shell game and a heist. And that's the problem right now. So yes, I agree what Lee is talking about. There is a problem with the administration and the top-down portion of schools, but we do not truthfully have a lot of money because in the school system, we have a lot more kids than when we grew up. So there's a big problem where there are kids that are struggling, that we have a ton of kids that are on free lunches, and that's a problem. We have a ton of kids that are sitting there struggling with all of it. So there's a lot more than just, hey, we need to get a group of parents together to pay for some kids to watch some YouTube videos. That's not a solution. That's still creating a big problem within our country. And that does not help out those lower income kids that rely on school free lunches at this moment, because you're not helping them by, hey, families get together. You still can't eat, kids, but guess what? You can watch YouTube. It doesn't do anything.
That was ridiculous. That was ridiculous.
That's not even the solution that was proposed.
Absolutely ridiculous, Jacoby.
Vouchers, that doesn't help.
Well, on that
Actually, it does.
No, it doesn't.
Well, in places where they've been tried, they've worked. Charter schools have worked. I mean, you have your political opinion, you have your bias. That's fine, but you're not prepared. You're not prepared to listen to anybody who has a different opinion.
About this. You have no credentials.
You have a mix. You have to fix the system itself. You're
by doing what? You don't come up with any. You don't come up with any solutions. All you do is you shoot down everyone else's ideas. Okay, and you don't have any solutions of yourself other than to continue to do whatever the Democrats are currently suggesting that you should do. That's your solution.
I don't fall into this woe is me Shaq moment. This is what you do all the time.
Oh, when was I saying woe is me? I haven't said woe is me. I haven't said woe is me. No, I haven't said woe is me at all to Toby. I have repeatedly said that you mischaracterize things that I have said and you shoot down everyone else's ideas, but you don't have any solution. Just like most people on the extreme wing of your political side, you've got no solutions. You've got nothing positive to add.
Here's a solution.
And you have no experience.
You have none either.
He's a former dean of a university.
I've actually taught in the school system. So wow on the team better crime. Now,
so did I, moron.
You did
dean at a law school, moron.
A+, awesome. Now, here's a
solution. You don't know Jack.
So he doesn't have any experience, and now that he says he does, that's awesome, really sarcastically. But you don't see how you shoot down how negative you are to
you try to act like an expert on all these woke ideas
Oh,
and you know
Dan,
nothing.
you're awesome,
You-
man. Go
you
ahead,
know
Dan. You
nothing.
know it all.
You have an opinion about everything, and you try to beat down
On
Chad.
that note, we're
You
getting
try to
ready to
beat
get
down
on out
me.
of here. So I've
You
got
try to
wrap
beat
this
down
up,
Lee.
but we
That's
actually
why I
got
don't like to
the show
come on the
going
program
now.
when you're here,
We'll
because you
actually
play
end
mind
this right
games.
about now.
It's all psycho crap.
That's why Lee and I get along. Lee, you and I can have great discussions, and I enjoy talking to you all the
Why are
time.
you shaking his
You're-
head?
It's mutual, Jacoby.
Yeah, so
It's mutual.
I mean, we listen to each other. You guys are over talking me when I try and finish and answer your question.
That's
But
not true.
Lee and I will go back and forth all day. Like when we had our gun discussion, Lee, I truly enjoyed going back and forth with you over that. And we have completely different views, but I truly
Very
enjoyed
different.
us sitting there going back and forth. So I fully respect you, and anything.
And on that note, we're
we
outta
wanna
here.
Talk about, we can talk about.
So maybe we
See you
should
guys
have
tomorrow.
two shows. Maybe
See
we
you
have two
tomorrow,
shows.
Lee.
And on that note, we're out of here.
Y'all take care.